Welcome to Crimson Guitars, welcome to Patrons Questions, episode 28. Today I'm going to be talking about trying to stop woods like Purpleheart and Pink Ivory, etc. from losing their colour. Also, a little bit about the True Temperament system and installing frets in around a bound fretboard, and I'm going to gloss over the top of something about wood moisture and the like. So, actually, all of those are really big questions, but it's fine. We'll get there. Okay, so this first one is from David William Neeson. He says, fretboard finishing dilemma. As I'm now happy with the inlays, fret slots and the shape of my fretboard, I've proceeded to sand it down to 400 grit finish. I say up to 400 grit, but we sand down. English. Okay, my dilemma now is that my phone is still on, which is probably a bad idea. My dilemma, hi. I'll just push that button. Phone's off. I can now talk again. My dilemma now is, as I've used a Purpleheart fretboard, as purchased from Crimson Guitars. Oh, it must be one of those flamed ones. Firstly, what finish is best to use to preserve the natural rich colour of the wood? My plan for the rest of the guitar when done is to use Crimson's finishing oil. And secondly, should I apply the finish before or after fitting the frets? Thanks for the advice, etc. Okay. First of all, always apply finish after the frets are on. Even when lacquering a fretboard, when you've got a maple fretboard, it is much safer and easier and more straightforward to lacquer over the frets and then slice down each side of the fret with a sharp scalpel blade and then remove the lacquer off the frets rather than lacquer a fretboard, do a perfect high gloss finish, fill your fret slots with gunk and crap and rubbish and stuff, and then try and put frets in there. Now, this is doubly important when you're doing an oiled fretboard. Now, I used to, very early on, I was in partnership with a wood turner, actually, the very first incarnation of a guitar building business I ever had. And good wood turners know how to get a good finish. And what he was doing and what he introduced me to was make the fretboard, and even before it was on the neck, we'd cut the slots, radius it, which is a bad idea in the first place. Always do this once it's on a nice solid neck to keep it straight. And then we would oil the hell out of the fretboard. Apply a coat of oil, rub it down with 1200 grit wet and dry paper, leave it to cure for a day, and then again, and then again, and again, and again. And we ended up with high gloss oil finished fretboards that looked like lacquer, really, kind of felt a little bit like lacquer. And then we'd have to wait for 2 or 3 weeks before we could put frets in because the fret slots were just full of oil. In fact, at some points we went in with acetone and cleaned up the inside of the slots so we could glue the frets in, which is another thing we did at that point. And it's just, it way overcomplicates the job, makes it much longer, much more time consuming, a hell of a lot less profitable. That's why that business, one of the reasons why that business failed. And yeah, it's just not necessary. So there we go. Now, the quick answer to the question, how do I keep my lovely vibrant purple colour? Build your guitar and then lock it in a dark cupboard or case and put it under your bed and then never let it see the light of day again, ever, period. Just live, get by on the memories of this fantastic instrument you've built. You facetious bastard. There is basically no way. There are high build clear lacquers that have got UV inhibitors in them, and you could use one of those. I doubt it would feel very nice. I mean, it would be a lacquered fretboard at that point. But basically, there's just no way. You will lose the vibrant purple. It is going to go brown over time. It just happens with everything. All of these woods, pink ivory and tulip wood, and yeah, everything changes color over time as the sun hits it. These woods were not designed by Mother Nature to be seen without bark on, dog. You know, it just isn't. So, yeah, you can build up. Okay, so if you build up a finish of, for example, guitar finishing oil, it will slow down the process. Okay, 3 or 4 coats of guitar finishing oil will slow down the process and keep the finish for longer. But really, the only option you've got is to avoid sunlight. And you know, personally, I love having my guitars on the wall where I can just grab the thing and play. I don't particularly want my guitars in cases under beds or anything. Not least because that's where children can reach. But anyway, so if you have any suggestions, please put it in the comments below. But yeah, that's pretty much the answer to that one. Okay, 28.2. This is a question from Ash Finlayson. He says, I've built a few necks now, the last 2 with wood binding, because that's what I like, he justifies. Justifiably. I am considering... I crack myself up. I am considering getting the True Temperament system for a future build. Don't. Question answered. Okay. He goes on to say, how the hell do you go about fitting these frets on a bound fretboard? That's relatively easy. Okay, so now the True Temperament system is cast in such a soft metal that you could chew a ledge out of the tang with your teeth and then just put it in the fretboard. In fact, I'm only slightly exaggerating. There are many issues with the True Temperament system. Okay, and I'm going to elucidate very rapidly. If you're interested, Christopher did a 2 or 3 video series of installing this system into a fretboard for a guitar that we built here. And the guitar ended up very well. And the customer loves it, and that's all well and good. But it drove him to distraction. And okay, so very first, as I just mentioned, they are cast out of sort of bronze, brass-ish kind of alloy, and I'm assuming because it's a small company, and I don't like dissing small companies, or anybody really for that matter, apart from myself, self-evident. They just, the material, the actual stuff it's cast from is not hard enough. We buy primo fret wire. And it's nickel silver, but it's got a much higher nickel content than, much higher brass content than the nickel, and it is much harder. It's similar to stainless steel frets. This stuff, if it was a standard fret wire, I would say is the cheapest fret wire that you can possibly buy. It's the sort of stuff that you would get on a 60 quid Strat that you buy at Argos, okay? The material is not good enough for frets. You will have to refret your guitar. Can you hear I'm getting angry, actually? If you're going to produce a product, make sure it's done out of the best possible materials, especially if you're charging that damn much for it. If you play even close to a lot, you will need to refret it within a couple of years. Okay, one issue. Number 2, you will need to level it very rapidly. And this is the biggest issue that Christopher personally had. Crowning those frets is a nightmare. You can't just go in there with a crowning file, even a crimson crowning file. You just can't do it. It's not straight. It's practically impossible. Okay. And then third and finally, I'm sure I could find multiple more issues. Dealing in kronas, for one. This fretboard costs 26,000 kroners. Anyway, the third and most important issue is we are used to playing guitars in a band situation with a bass player, with a keyboardist, with a saxophonist and a squeeze box player. I have strange taste in music. We don't want a guitar to be perfectly in tune. Unless you will never leave your bedroom and never play with another instrument, it actually sounds more out of tune to my ears playing with other people. It just does. The annoying thing is, before we built a guitar with this system in it, I thought that it was going to be the next best thing. I really was a huge fan of the idea of it, of the concept, and it just sucks. It just really sucks. It does what it's supposed to. The science behind it is 100% valid. Yeah, perfect tone with this gauge string and at this tuning, etc. That's another thing. You can't change your tuning. You can't decide to go drop whatever, or you just can't. Each fret system is designed for a specific tuning system. But so ation avoid it. Sorry. Okay, and finally, 28.3. This is a question from Bizman62. First of all, he says the last question I answered of his wasn't actually his. It was from Jason Denson, asking about temperature or moisture-created expansion compression issues when using different types of wood. And then we went on. But anyway, his question here is, okay, Bizman62. What the heck? Here comes the arrogant bastard! Exclamation mark. Is there a point where wood stops absorbing moisture from the air? I.e., at what point can the wood be considered so dead it won't change its properties during climate changes? Okay, what you do is you kill the wood dead and you let it dry as much as humanly possible. Okay, and then you flood it with epoxy. Wood will never reach equilibrium. Okay, it has pores. These pores have been designed for millennia. I really am being a facetious prick today. I don't know why. Sorry. Hi. Yeah. Self-knowledge, route to betterment, etc. These pores have evolved over millennia specifically to transport something from one part of a tree to the other. Once you've removed all of the water, all of the moisture, unless you've done it very, very aggressively using a kiln, which actually tends to collapse the capillaries and the veins, etc. That's a human body, isn't it? We'll go with it. It tends to collapse and destroy the actual structure of the tree. It also crystallizes various minerals and bits and pieces, which is one of the reasons why kiln-dried wood is harder and heavier than air-dried wood, for example, and not quite so easy to use as well. So unless you do that, you've got these lovely, pristine roots for moisture to come in and out of a guitar. Okay, so now this isn't to say that you can't slow down the process. There is, and I forget the terminology, it's this multi-syllable word. If you dry a wood down to, for example, 3% moisture content, then when it goes back into your workshop, it's going to take on moisture. It is just going to take on moisture. But the point at which it stops taking on moisture is about 2 to 3% lower than if you hadn't gone that low. Okay, so essentially, if you have a piece of air-dried wood, the equilibrium in the UK is about 14% moisture content. Okay, so that's just, we air-dry the wood, we bring it into the workshop, we use it, 14%, that's about where it is. If we take a piece of, for example, that gorgeous poplar that we bought the other day, It's come in at 16. The stuff that we've had in stock for the last year or so is now down to about 4 or 5. We could use that poplar and it would be okay, maybe dry it till 14 or so, proper moisture content, or basic resting moisture content for the UK. I'm not explaining this very well. The stuff that is currently at 4 or 6, if we then bring it out of the drying room, out of the dehumidifiers, etc., and leave it just to settle for 6 months, instead of settling at 14%, it will settle at about 12. And there is less variation. Okay, it takes on moisture slower, it loses moisture slower, it's just got a lower equilibrium point, which is something that we want. So if you dry it right down properly, which isn't that difficult to do actually in a home workshop environment, you'll be okay. And it does, yeah, it slows it down. Now, the final thing to say is finish. Basically, this is the reason why we put finish on guitars. Well, one of them is to protect it. The most important thing is because it just brings a grain out and makes it look so pretty. But it fills the end grain. It caps off or slows down the amount of moisture that will come in and out of an instrument. This is one of the reasons why you shouldn't forget about finishing inside your cavities, really. If you have the option, slather some oil in there, spray some clear coat on. Was it Brad Angrove? He's an interesting YouTuber, good finisher, and he was moaning the other day about people calling clear coat lacquer. In the UK, everything's a lacquer. If it's clear, it's lacquer, despite the fact that it didn't come out of a lac beetle's bottom. So there we go. Anyway, yeah, finish. Once you've dried it, dry it as much as you possibly can. Let it settle in the workshop as you build it. Slather some finish on, and you'll have a much, much, much lower variation. If you're really worried about movement, put carbon fiber rods in there. Use multi-laminate blanks, etc., etc., etc. A lot of you are working in workshops where you don't have very good climate control. Hell, I don't have very good climate control in my studio. In fact, it's swelteringly hot. I don't know why I'm wearing the waistcoat today. It's too hot. But I look good. Hi, I'm going. Cheerio. Thanks for watching. Thank you for being amazing. Thank you for forgiving me for my lapses and idiosyncrasies. I will see you. Well, actually, do you know what? I'm going to film episode 29 now. So next week, you're going to get more of the same sort of... I'm in a funny mood today. Do you know what's just happened? Patreon exclusive. I walked into my studio, and James's desk is just there. I walked into my studio, and the post sort of followed me up the stairs behind me, and I didn't really pay attention to it. And somebody, my sister, exclaimed, "Hide it!" And then somebody else shut my studio door really quickly. And then they disseminated and tried to distract me with, you know, my silver play button has arrived, and apparently I'm not allowed to open it. And I'm so excited.